So I guess you've gotten this question 1,000 times, but for my viewers, how do you translate something that's creepy and scary from the movies that I loved into something that's family friendly, an animation?
So, what we tried to do from the very beginning with Gremlins was to replicate the tone. That is the thing that is the thing that's most special to me about the original Gremlins movies. They're funny, they're scary, they're also really emotional. It's about friendship. But the movies are also really weird, and we wanted to make sure that the TV show really reflected that. And that variety of tones is something that we just, once we really established that in the first couple episodes, it was just fun to be like, all right, well, we can go scary here. We can go funny. We can go weird. And also, most importantly, season 1 is really about the origins of that friendship of Gizmo, Elle, and Sam. And season 2 is kind of like, how do you stay friends as people change? And that type of serialized storytelling where it's almost like one big story about these 3 characters, that was something that, as a kid when I watched cartoons, I think I kind of missed that longer storytelling arc where you're really finding out deeper and deeper things about the characters. And season 1 was more Sam-centric, season 2 is more Elle-centric. And yeah, that was kind of how we approached it. And same thing goes for the music, I think.
Yeah, I was going to ask it, how did that inform you, instruments-wise and all that stuff?
100%. A lot of that's covered in creative conversations and just to kind of say what are the goals and how, what's the background of how you want to write this. Okay, it's going to take place in this decade, in this location, and then when we move to season 2, it's going to do this. So, you introduce different instruments, new instruments that are of that time and of that geographical space, I guess, but everything that I'm doing with the music is heavily influenced by and dictated, frankly, by what's going on screen in the story, the exploration of those characters. So, and it's really important to have good, strong melodic themes for their friendship, which is probably one of their biggest themes that I use. So when they go out and they're fighting against all these evils and battles, and they're changing and evolving as people, let alone their friendships, you come back to those themes, and then you really feel the absence of them, and you feel coming back to them, and it's there. It's something that even if again an audience can't hear it or know it, they're sensing it, and as the big group hug happens, so there's the music kind of envelop that. So it's 100% dictated by what's going on screen in the story.
I'm Asian. I'm an immigrant, Asian American. When it comes to stuff about Asian mythology or Chinese mythology, whatever, I'm always curious, okay, how did they get this right? What kind of spin to it? Talk a bit about tackling the Asian mythology or Chinese mythology, approaching that for the audience.
Well, it's funny, from my very first pitch on this show, I talked about seeing Gremlins for the first time as a kid, and Gremlins, like I said, the tone, it's funny, it's scary, it's weird. And that's a pretty atypical tone for a Hollywood movie, but I actually felt really at home because a lot of Chinese mythology, spirit stories are really funny, and they're also really weird, even though they're also very scary. And so I talked a lot about the spirits and creatures that I grew up hearing about from my family. And season 1 really has a lot of those in there, like the Jiangshi, the kind of hopping zombie vampires. There's the Tea of Forgetting and Meng Po, and there's all sorts of things that I grew up hearing about that are in that first season. And then season 2 was really about the stories that I kind of grew up hearing about in American school, even though I was, my parents were Chinese immigrants. I really heard about their stories from the country that, our ancestors are from. But in American school, you hear about Johnny Appleseed and
Bass Reeves.
Exactly. all these characters that come up in the back half of season 2.
Mine was, and I'll actually say that just from another angle too, that I'm second generation Chinese. So my father was born here in the States. My mother, I'm half Chinese. My mother is Caucasian, and my grandparents on my father's side are immigrants. So I feel like I even have this, I actually had to do a lot more research, because I didn't grow up with these stories. I kind of grew up with that sort of almost a muted immigrant, culture. I was not taught at all to be ashamed of my culture, but it was more like assimilate and be American. And I think that's what's so amazing so refreshing about having a story that leans into those types of stories. That this is like, hey, we don't have to. We don't have to make that quiet or push that off to the side. We can, normalize that and put that on screen. And so, I did do research on, Chinese opera and some of these, like the Jiangshi, as well. And the Tea of Forgetfulness, and I was like, wow, what is that? I wonder if there's a way to put, musically instill some of that mythology and that authenticity into it. So that was a fun. I mean, I guess honestly, to be honest, a more like personal exploration as well of like my own culture that I didn't really have growing up.
Brennan, let me start with you because I'm Asian. I'm an immigrant. I'm always like curious, like how does this, are they gonna get it right? This the details of the Chinese mythology, and talk to me about that kind of stuff.
Sure thing. So our goal was always to hopefully get it, if not right, at least feel right. Like if it was like not 100% in the correct actual details, always make sure at least it felt right. But we did work with consultants. We also just did a ton of research. Besides stuff that Z brought in himself, we had a writer on staff who she majored in Asian American history. We also had some of our artists like really were just pulling up references from from Shanghai in the 1920s to make sure that like whatever our sets looked correct, and like we could point to like exact spots to kind of like make sure it all felt real.
I love it, love it. Joe, speaking of consulting producer, you are.
Big consulting.
That's right. So, big fan of the movies, of course. Talk to me about, did you kind of like say, okay, this is too much or this is not enough? Do you pull that kind of string for this kind of?
I don't think I pulled any strings. I did take a look at the strings that they were pulling to see if whether or not they lined up with my understanding of who these characters were. It's like when I did the Looney Tunes Back in Action movie, I did it because I wanted to make sure that the characters would be true to the characters that I grew up with instead of being turned into things that they weren't and having them do hip-hop and go out of character and do all this stuff that was just very current and now would be totally dated. I mean, there's one really dated thing in the first Gremlins movie where this gremlin does a break dance. And I don't think any kid who watches that today has any idea what the hell is going on there.
Yeah, but you can see it's creepy and scary, also with family-friendly animated.
Yeah, creepy and scary and family-friendly. I mean, kids are underestimated. They're much tougher than people think, and they like scary movies. The success of Walt Disney was based not just on the cutesy stuff, but on the fact that the Snow White is a scary movie. Pinocchio's transformation is scary, and it's stuff that the kids like scary. And so it doesn't mean you should be ripping out guts in front of them, which we don't do. In fact, there's no blood at all on screen in this show, although people get offed, But I'm just impressed that you're an immigrant and you haven't been deported yet.
Yeah, no, thank God. Yeah. And John, Daniel Clamp, big fan of your character.
Thank you. I had a great time with him.
So, is it Daniel Clamp again for this role?
No.
Okay, you're not gonna spill spoilers for us?
There's some strange connection that should be clearer.
Fair.
Yeah.
You're such a lovable billionaire in that movie.
Yeah.
So cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So charismatic.
We're out of those.
I know. I miss them.
Well, by the